What's up, guys? Diggle from SGN, back with another episode of Tales of Mortal Kombat. Today we're going to be talking about Mortal Kombat Deception, which is probably the game that I've been wanting to talk about the most ever since I started this series. And the reason that I want to talk about this one so much is because, in my opinion, from a purely like what the game has in terms of content, this is probably the peak that a Mortal Kombat game has ever reached. I think that this is probably the peak that a fighting game series has ever reached. So I think that if they can go back to this type of thing, having so much variety of modes, having so much good content in there, and they could really achieve something special. And until they do that, Deception's always going to be my number one greatest Mortal Kombat game of all time. Now let's go ahead and talk about the things that I really love about the game, and later on some of the things I hate about it. Starting off, of course, with the presentation, as always. And this is pretty much standard for the 3D era. Alright, when it comes to gameplay and stuff like that, it's not on par. But the intros to Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, Mortal Kombat Deception, and Mortal Kombat Armageddon were simply phenomenal. Alright, the fact that you can watch them over and over again, each time kind of learn something new, because you always see something a little bit different. And the fact that they're so well done, they're so well produced, the graphics are great to see, and it does explain to you the backstory of what's going on in the series before the game takes place, and it really does immerse you into what you're about to do, what you're about to experience, and what you're about to try to accomplish by trying to win the game, whether it's with whatever character you love, or whether it's the main character like Shujinko in this case. So in my opinion, the intros to these games, they simply cannot be undervalued, because they are one of the greatest things I've ever seen in video games. And that's probably pretty exaggerated, right? You might think it's kind of exaggerated, but in fighting games, you don't generally have something like that, at least not that I've experienced. And I've experienced quite a few fighting games, and nothing like that really ever comes to mind. And the fact that Mortal Kombat Deception's intro was so good, where we see how the events from Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance kind of took off, what happened after Deadly Alliance, we see moving on to Mortal Kombat Deception. So we see Raiden, with pretty much everybody else dead, trying to fight Shang Tsung and Quan Chi to try to stop the Deadly Alliance from being able to resurrect the lost army of the Dragon King. Of course, during the battle, all of a sudden the Dragon King pops out, which means Shang Tsung, Raiden, and Quan Chi, mortal enemies, decide the only way that they're going to be able to survive this is to kill the Dragon King. So they all turn onto the same page, and they all try to fight him. They all fail. Raiden's last attempt is to essentially commit suicide and destroy everything, and that even fails. The Dragon King survives that and was pretty much unscathed. So the fact that we see that three of the most powerful characters in Mortal Kombat history align themselves together, and they were pretty much completely unable to do any damage to the Dragon King, it really does just kind of show you how powerful this character was. So it wasn't just awesome seeing something like that, seeing mortal enemies be put on the same page to try to fight a common rival, a common opponent, a common problem, essentially. It wasn't just that. It was the fact that this giant monster, who we've heard about quite a bit throughout the series before that, was such a powerful force that literally even they couldn't do shit to him. So that just really pushed me into thinking that the Dragon King was a very badass character. And of course, going into the storyline a little bit later, we'll discuss the issues they have with him. I'll discuss the reasons why he kind of didn't reach the potential he had. But based on the intro, and based on the intimidation factor, and based on the storyline that it looked like they were possibly building, Onaga was a phenomenal character, and I was very much looking forward to seeing how he would progress, and whether or not he would be kind of like Shao Kahn, in the sense that he would become a very iconic villain, and possibly be one of the greatest villains in video game history. Did he reach that? I'll talk about that a little bit later on, but for now, the intro, the presentation of that was all very nice. I really like the menus. I love the fact that there's so many different options, which I'll talk about more in the gameplay section of this video, but there was just so much to love about the presentation. The music was also pretty nice. Nothing like crazy special, but definitely pretty nice. And of course you have the crypt, you have all that stuff. So there's plenty of good presentation there. Unfortunately, from a graphical point of view, the game looks pretty bad. Of course, it's pretty much on par with Deadly Alliance and Armageddon, because simply they weren't able to really implement the technology in a way to really make the characters look good. Of course, there are some good costumes. For example, Melina's Deception costume in particular is very nice, as well as Ermac's costume. There's quite a few other good costumes in the game as well. But I think that overall the graphics aren't that great. And of course, you can't really expect much because it was PlayStation 2, and some of the arenas actually do look very, very nice. So there are specific things about the game that look good, but for the most part, it doesn't look all that great. When it comes to characters, this might actually be one of the better rosters in Mortal Kombat history, and I have it up there among the top 3 or 4 because there are a lot of really interesting new characters, as well as the return of a lot of the most popular returning characters. So there was pretty much something for everybody, and I'm going to go ahead and read off the character list. And the new characters were Ashura, Dairu, Darius, Havoc, Hotaru, Kira, Cobra, Onaga, and Shujinko. The returning characters were Baraka, Boraicho, Ermac, Goro, Jade, Cabal, Kenshi, Li Mei, Liu Kang, Melina, Nightwolf, Noob Smoke, Raiden, Scorpion, Shao Kahn, Sindel, Sub-Zero, and Tanya. And of course, Shao Kahn and Goro were both part of the roster that was on the Deception Unchained, which was on the PSP, and it may have also been on the game. Yeah, it was also on the GameCube. So they weren't in the regular PlayStation 2 version, but you could get them in the other version or the Xbox version. So you could only get them in the GameCube version or the PSP version. So they aren't on the main game with the main release or something like that, but they are also in later editions of it. So it's a very, very good character list, and it was the first time we were able to play as Shao Kahn to really experience what it's like to be Shao Kahn. Of course, there were some balancing issues with that, which was kind of a big issue with the 3D era, but it was a very, very nice touch in my opinion. It was something I really enjoyed to do when I was playing on the PSP, so I think that was a pretty nice addition, as well as using Goro, and I think that overall it was a very, very nice roster. For example, Ashura is a character I think that they definitely could use more, and they could definitely give her an even cooler backstory. Not like change her backstory, but make it even better. I think that, of course, Dairu was shit, Darius was awful. Havoc, I think, is one of the better new characters. I think that he's very unique. I think that overall his look is also very cool. His moveset's really cool, and just overall he's a very interesting character. Hotaru, much like Havoc, being the fact that he's his rival, pretty interesting. He's not my favorite, but he's also not something I hate. He's just kind of in the middle for me there. I think that they could definitely bring him back and do something with him. It's just a matter of, do they want to take that risk? Of course, they also have Kira, who wasn't like awful, but nothing special for me. We have Cobra, which was just the epitome of garbage. I mean, I was basically just like a joke. We have Ken, which I don't even like Ken in Street Fighter, so I didn't want to see him in Mortal Kombat. And then, of course, Onaga, a character I really, really like. And Shujinko, who was stupid as hell in the storyline. I'll get to that in a minute. But overall, I think it was a pretty big part of the game because, of course, he is the main focus of the main mode in the game. And one of the coolest things about this selection of characters is that, for the most part, you can find them all in what I think is probably the coolest mode to ever exist in a Mortal Kombat game, which is Conquest Mode. And I'm not talking about the Deadly Alliance version. I'm not talking about the Armageddon one. This version of Conquest Mode that you find in Mortal Kombat Deception is the epitome of immersion. All right, when you play that game, when you play that mode right there, you can go to the Nether Realm, you can go to Edenia, you can go to Outworld, you can go to Earth Realm, you can go everywhere, literally everywhere. You can go to the Chaos Realm, you can go to all the realms that we've ever experienced in Mortal Kombat, and really feel what it's like to be in those realms, in a way that we hadn't experienced before. Because prior to that, of course, now in Mortal Kombat X and Mortal Kombat 9, we can see them on screen with a lot of cutscenes and things like that. But prior to Deception, except for fighting in those arenas, there was no way to really experience those areas, to really experience those realms. So the fact that they were able to do that, build a mode so immersive, but not just also like fun to explore in, but also very fun to play. The story was okay. I'll talk about that a little bit later on, but like overall, the experience of it, traveling, seeing all these amazing places that you've always seen and thought of and wanted to really experience, being able to free roam in it, it was very, very cool. And Shaolin Monks, as cool as the game was, it was only all Mortal Kombat 2. In Mortal Kombat Deception, you have so many different places. I mean, Mortal Kombat 1 and 2 was Shaolin Monks. Sorry, not just Mortal Kombat 2. But, regardless, there's a lot of places in the Mortal Kombat universe that we hadn't experienced before. So as cool as Shaolin Monks was, it did also have a limited amount of people that played it. So for the most part, everybody was experiencing the Netherrealm and all that stuff for the very first time through Mortal Kombat Deception. So it was a very, very good mode, and also it was very fun to explore the storyline. And I will, like I said, talk about that a little bit later on. In terms of the gameplay itself, apart from the regular, like the regular arcade ladder, there were some variations there as well, because essentially the gameplay is the same as Deadly Alliance for the most part. And there are people that like it, and there are also people like me who don't like it all that much For example, just to give you an idea, there was like 2 fighting styles per character plus a weapon style. I do like the idea of a weapon style. It's just that it kind of made you slower. In certain characters, it seemed very overpowered, so it wasn't balanced very well. But to me, it just always felt like they had 2 different fighting styles that you could mix in, not because they were trying to make it deeper, which of course I understand that they probably were trying to make it deeper, but when I was playing it, I was never really feeling satisfied about either fighting style, because they both kind of just seemed very limited. And of course, you could mix them in together with combos, but me not being very good at combos in general, especially back then, I was never like particularly good at it, so I just never really felt like it was a very deep system. It was a system that I could really enjoy, especially because all the combos were pretty much 100%. You have to do it in this exact order. You couldn't kind of mix in your own things and make it your own combos, at least not from my experience. And I tried to do some, but like I said, I'm not very good at the games, especially back then. So I'm not going to go too hard into it, but I just think that the gameplay system wasn't that great, and I was never really a big fan of playing the 3D era games in terms of just flat-out arcade mode and the regular gameplay. However, they did have some great alternations. For example, they had Puzzle Combat, and Puzzle Combat is one of the best things in all of gaming, in my opinion, in terms of Mortal Kombat, of course, and all in terms of fighting games, because it gave you a very interesting way to experience it, because now you had characters divided into classes. Now you could go with a completely different strategy, which if you know how to play chess, you're going to have a bit of an advantage, but there's also plenty of abilities like teleportation or a bunch of other stuff you can heal. There's so many interesting things there. If you're on specific slots, you have bonuses. So there was just so much depth to that mode, which compared to other modes that we've seen in Mortal Kombat games that are like alternative, like Mortal Kombat or even Tetris Combat to a certain extent, this one was just a very deep system, and I really, really enjoyed it. I think they probably could have done a bit better with it, but regardless, what they gave us was very, very fun, and one of the best modes that we've probably ever seen in a Mortal Kombat game. And of course, we also had, like I mentioned, Puzzle Combat, which was basically Tetris with with basically Mortal Kombat graphics and Mortal Kombat little mini characters fighting and things like that. So it was very, very cool to do. I'm not a huge Tetris fan, I'm not going to lie, so it wasn't like my favorite mode of all time, but as a little thing that's fun to do, especially like on an airplane or something like that, it's definitely plenty of fun. You will pass a bunch of time. There's different characters you can use as well. I don't think there's all the characters, but there were quite a few of them, which all have fatalities at the end for when they win. So there was just some really awesome stuff there. And overall, I think that if you look at the modes in the game, if you look at what's in the crypt as well, there's plenty of amazing stuff in there. And it was just probably the best game in terms of pure content, in terms of variation of how many things you can do, whether it be conquest mode, puzzle combat, chess combat, regular arcade mode, experiencing the crypt. There was plenty of things you could explore. And it was just such a great game in general from that point of view. And going into the story mode, I have mixed thoughts about the story. Of course, it was very cool, the fact that Shang Tsung, Quan Chi, and Raiden had to, were kind of backed into a corner, and that you were Shujinko, who was essentially the only hope of Earth Realm and the rest of the realms essentially from surviving. Because basically the whole base of the story is Damaji, who is his spirit, comes to you, who's a young man who's training under Bo Raicho, who wants to become, who wants to enter Mortal Kombat essentially, and he's kind of like the chosen one. He's kind of like a new Liu Kang type of thing. So of course, Damaji comes to him, he explains to him about the Kamidogus, and moral of the story is you have to go find all the Kamidogus, and you have to bring it to Damaji, and then what happens is that is indeed the Dragon King using a spirit form to contact you and bring in the Kamidogus, which are the way that he can come back and be full power, and you have to defeat him once you actually do bring him back to full power. And of course, the biggest issue, and I've said this in quite a few of my videos before, is the fact that by the time you got about halfway through the story, it was pretty obvious that Damaji was indeed the Dragon King, or at least that he was a very, very bad character. So you were kind of just working for the bad guy, and it took Shujinko essentially until the big reveal to really understand what was going on. Whereas for the most part, most players who weren't little kids or who weren't kind of just not paying attention very much, it was pretty obvious as it was, like halfway through the game, that you were indeed just kind of doing something that was going to go very, very badly for the rest of the realm. So that was kind of stupid, but overall, the fact that you can encounter so many characters, there were so many secrets like unlocking Liu Kang's zombie form, there was just so much about that mode that was so phenomenal, and I really, really loved it, and the story in the game is just so awesome. Alright, it was really probably the most epic portion of Mortal Kombat, except for possibly like Mortal Kombat 2 and Mortal Kombat 3. I think that's probably the peak in terms of storytelling, the peak in terms of the amount of characters that were there, the interesting characters that were there, and the villain being such a powerful guy. Of course, Blaze was probably more powerful because he was literally the end of the universe and stuff like that, but there was something about Blaze and that whole storyline that just didn't really appeal to me that much. It was kind of stupid in a lot of ways in the way they executed it. Whereas Mortal Kombat Deception, yes, they made quite a few mistakes, but overall, it was a great game. It had a really good story, like I said, with quite a few mistakes, but overall, a very, very enjoyable story with a very, very enjoyable game. Now I want you guys to let me know in the comment section down below what you think of Mortal Kombat Deception. Is it your favorite game of all time in Mortal Kombat, or is it one of your, top 5 maybe? Well, let me know all these things in the comment section down below. And what do you think of the things that I said? What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? Let me know all these things in the comments down below that we can get a nice little conversation going. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell that way you're notified every time a video comes out from my channel, as well as sharing the video, which is always very helpful. And thank you so much to anybody who does any of the things I just mentioned. And as always, big shout out to my subscribers. I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.